impulse went to the chip guys. And now now memory is 30% more expensive. So the whole AI ecosystem just kind of screwed themselves and made the cost of their build out even that much more expensive and their ROI that much lower. And that's why this party is going to end. I didn't expect that each of these CEOs and these hyperscalers would do what they did. And they all chased CapEx to the upside without realizing they're in a commodity business. And here we are with, the gimme out of China, whatever it is, gimme out of China. Like everyone's now freaking out that the frontier models in the US are done. I don't believe that, but this is the kind of thing that, when you're spending all your precious cash flow in a commodity like business, I didn't think they would be this stupid, but I guess they were.
Was it almost like it was cult-like behavior? I mean, it's like they all got brainwashed or something at exactly the same time. Had Elon Musk talking about the singularity, and it's almost like everybody just got, it took on this religious fervor where even the biggest, most established businesses said, if you're not in AI, you're going to be out of business tomorrow. And I mean, I don't even know who thinks that way, but to see some of the, like you're right, some of these CEOs, it was as if they got brainwashed all of a sudden and just everything shifted to AI. And it was almost like the entire stock market, and not just the stock market, credit market went with it. Everybody just kind of flowed with them because these are geniuses. Why wouldn't we listen to these people? It was just really strange.
Yeah, and it happened fast. And look, there's an analogy I can make of the dot-com bubble because I was there. Back then, brick and mortar companies, their valuations were going lower, and all these, new internet companies were scraped like Pets. I'll just use Pets.com. So everybody thought these internet companies were going to disintermediate the brick and mortar companies. That was the belief. And to the point where the brick and mortar companies got so scared because they saw their stock prices going down, they all started .com, pilot projects. They all had it, in their annual reports, they all talked about their internet strategy and they threw money at it. So it kind of fed, there's this bubble between brick and mortar companies spending on internet stuff, internet guys, doing deals with each other. So it created this illusion of revenue growth, and it was the end of the brick and mortars. Same kind of dynamic here. Fortune 500 companies are watching AI companies talk about how much money you're going to save, and if you don't do it, you're going to be left behind. So they all start their AI pilots. They come to find there's no ROI, and they come to find that the token maxing spend blow up their budgets. So I think you're going to see Fortune 500 companies reassess the spend they did that they kind of did out of fear. And just like a lot of the spending in the dot-com bubble was out of fear, that fear is going to dissipate.
So at least sets up kind of like a backlash, right? Because you have the initial wave, everybody believes in the hype because there's no information that tells you the hype isn't real. And it sounds like it's going to live up to its, there's promise there. There's a tremendous future. And so I guess what it comes down to is people are following false signals. I think the problem is what we're really talking about here is that it's not just one false signal or two false signals. It seems like they're all over the landscape. And what the real fear is that some of these false signals start to combine and then they lead to the proverbial snowball going down the hill. Is that one false signal gets repaired or gets picked up, and then that leads to another one, which leads to another one. And pretty soon, we're not just questioning AI, we're questioning almost everything. And that's really the contagion that spills out of private credit and out of AI, right? That's kind of where what we're both seeing here is that the future is we've got to clean up all of these falsehoods.
Yeah, and look, I think people talk about bubbles. Bubbles are a feature of capitalism, not a bug. There's always been bubbles, and over a long period of time, they do serve a purpose. Not when they blow up. When they're painful when they blow up, and they're obviously great for the early investors on the way up. But the purpose of these bubbles is to overbuild. There's a hype cycle on a new technology. A lot of money chases it. There's too much infrastructure that's built. It gets commoditized. The bubble bursts. But then the benefits to society come much later. Like we built the railroads. Great. A lot of those people that invested in the railroads in the early days went bankrupt. Who were the big beneficiaries of the railroad build out? It was the steel guys, the guys who made steel.
The guys who kept their heads cool and stayed liquid.
Yeah. And just like the internet was real. And, I make this analogy. All of the real internet wealth that was created happened after the dot-com bubble. Google IPO'd after, Facebook IPO'd after, Apple benefited benefited from the cheap broadband. That's why we have a smartphone. If there was no cheap broadband, we would not have smartphones. Amazon was one of the only survivors. They benefited. And there's a whole host of other companies that, grew out of this and became, the big winners in the web infrastructure bill. It wasn't the guys laying the dark fiber, that's for sure. So AI is real, but who are the winners going to be? I would say that these large language model companies, these frontier labs, are not going to be the winners. It's going to be people, once we recapitalize all this spend at lower prices, we're going to have companies that figure out a way to monetize and come up with a business model that makes sense. Right now, we don't have one.
Yeah, it's always the people who come afterward. So I think the big lesson here that we kind of want to leave with is that history is definitely a guide. History is not linear. It's circular. We see these same types of processes all over time, which means that, when you see all of these warning signs that pop up in bubble cycles throughout history, and we're seeing them again today, you really do need to be careful, right, Ed? I mean, you got to really have your head on a swivel here, because there's a lot of stuff going on. It's not just, the typical mainstream noise where everybody's shouting about things, whatever the biggest thing is today. It's really fundamental stuff that's deep down in the roots of the system that are really starting to put up more and more warning signs.
Yeah. And we're not going to talk about this today. Maybe we'll talk another time. But, we put out a U.S. economic report. We cited 3 risk sectors: AI, which we talked about today, private credit, which is part of AI, and private credit, which is part of the rest of the economy. Housing is a problem, we think, and China is seriously going into a key phase of its crisis. And all those things are even, they're all interlocking. And, we were calling for a recession at the end of 23, 24. We were wrong. And our models had never been wrong. So we asked ourselves, what was different this time?
I don't think you guys were wrong. I think what needs to happen is we need to redefine what a recession is. People think a recession is where, the economy falls off, you get negative GDP, negative payrolls. To me, a recession could be a number of different things. I call it forgot how to grow. It's a style of recession where you don't have enough upside. You have this unstable situation where you get a little bit of upside and a little bit of downside, a little bit of upside, a little bit of downside. So I don't think you were wrong at all. Not that it means anything to you or anybody else. Well, I think your models are right on.
Well, what we did is we asked ourselves, we did the academic question, why were we wrong? And then that led us to the discovery that when you have a country like the US and you have, typically speaking, 1 million legal immigrants come in a year, we dropped 20 million, most of which happened in 23 and 24. And we spent $1.5 trillion to get them in here. That stimulate, and you put money in those people's hands, it goes directly into the economy. So they floated a crappy economy with immigration.
But it didn't change the crappy economy, though, right?
No, it did. It kept it afloat. It prevented
another friggin' false signal that we have to deal with.
Yeah, and it kept home prices high, and now home prices are rolling over because the marginal immigrant is not coming in anymore. We're not seeing deportations, but the borders.
Yeah, that's the thing. We can talk about this quite a long time. I really appreciate your time, Ed, and for sharing your insights. And yes, we will definitely do this again. That's the other thing. I know we need to talk about housing too, because that's one that's starting to percolate up onto people's radar too, because as if we need to worry about the housing and mortgage markets again.